There is a moment on this path a few minutes in when the trees thin and the world simply opens. No hills, no far shore, nothing to give it scale. Just water running out to a horizon that curves away like an ocean. This is Meyers Beach on the south shore of Lake Superior, and everything you are about to see was made by that water. The sand under our boots, the cliffs ahead, the caves inside them, all of it patiently by waves. We are in Bayfield County, in the far north of Wisconsin, at the tip of a peninsula that pushes out into the largest freshwater lake on Earth by surface area. Scattered offshore lie 21 islands, protected together with 12 miles of this mainland shoreline as Islands National Lakeshore, managed by the National Park Service. Meyers Beach is the mainland gateway. From here, a trail runs east along the cliff tops, and below those cliffs is one of the strangest coastlines in North America. The story starts about 1 billion years ago when the middle of this continent tried to tear itself in half. Geologists call it the Mid-Continent Rift. Molten rock welled up through a long crack that curved from what is now Kansas, up under Lake Superior and back down into Michigan. Lava poured out in flow after flow, piling into thick black basalt. Then the rifting stopped, the continent held, and the great scar it left behind began slowly to sag. That sagging left a basin, and basins fill. For hundreds of millions of years, rivers ran off the surrounding highlands and spread across it in braided channels, dumping sand. The sand was rich in iron, which oxidized as it lay in the sun and air. That is why every cliff here is red. Layer settled on layer in flat sheets, until the sand was buried deep enough that pressure and mineral cement locked the grains together and turned loose riverbed into solid stone. Geologists group these rocks as the Bayfield Group, and they were laid down in the late Precambrian, from roughly 1 billion years ago until something like 660 million years ago. 3 formations make it up: the Orienta below, the Gichigami above, and between them the Devil's Island Formation, deposited on broad sand flats in fine, thin, even beds. That thinness is the whole secret. The Devil's Island sandstone splits and peels along its layers, and that is what makes caves possible. Then, far more recently, came the ice. Repeated glaciations buried this country under sheets of ice more than 1 kilometer thick, and the ice ground along that old rift scar like a plow following a furrow. It deepened the trough, scoured out the soft rock, and when the last of it melted back, meltwater filled the hollow. That hollow is Lake Superior. The islands offshore are simply the high ground that the ice failed to erase. So the lake arrived and the lake went to work. Waves drive water into every crack and bedding plane in the cliff. Water freezes in winter and expands and pries the rock apart. Storm waves slam air into the openings and compress it, and the pressure blows sandstone off from the inside. Slowly the cracks widen into slots, the slots into chambers, the chambers into arches and pillars and vaulted rooms. The caves are not carved. They are quarried by weather. tool doing the carving is not a modest lake. The Ojibwe call it Gichigami, the Great Sea, and the name is fair. Its surface covers roughly 31,700 square miles. It holds around 3 quadrillion gallons of water, close to a tenth of all the fresh surface water on the planet. And it is cold. The average water temperature hovers near 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In summer, on a calm day, it looks like a swimming pool. It is not one. The beach itself is a small miracle of a place. A crescent of pale sand between wooded bluffs, driftwood bleached silver, and water so clear you can count the stones under it. Everything that lands here has been sorted by the lake. The sand grains are the very same grains the ancient rivers carried, released from the cliff face a few hundred meters away, ground round again, and stacked here for a while before the lake takes them somewhere else. In winter, if everything goes exactly right, this coast becomes something else entirely. Groundwater seeping through the sandstone freezes as it emerges, and it does not simply coat the caves. It builds. Curtains of ice hang from the arches. Columns grow floor to ceiling. Every chamber fills with pale blue and cream and glassy white. When the lake surface freezes hard enough to walk on, the National Park Service can open a route across the ice, and people walk out to see it. And almost always they cannot. Safe access needs Lake Superior ice cover above 90%, ideally above 95%. The long-term average maximum is around 60. Between 2000 and 2023, the mainland ice caves were open on only about 2% of all days. The great years were 2014 and 2015, when tens of thousands came. After that, nothing, for more than a decade, until a single day in February of 2026 before a storm shut it again. That is not bad luck. It is a trend. Park Service data show the local ice season starting later and ending earlier, decade after decade, as air and water warm. The caves will keep freezing. The lake in front of them will keep refusing to. So the ice caves are becoming something people mostly see in photographs, a rumor of a thing that used to happen here more often. It is one of the plainest climate stories in the national park system. Long before any of that was measured, people lived along this shore and their descendants live here still. This is Anishinaabe country, the homeland of the Ojibwe. They came to the western Great Lakes over generations, moving by water in birchbark canoes, hunting, fishing, tapping maple, and following a seasonal round that used every part of the lake and the forest behind it. They did not find an empty wilderness. They made a homeland and they never left it. The Ojibwe migration is remembered in oral tradition as a long journey west from the Atlantic coast, guided by prophecy through a series of stopping places. The people were told they would know the end of it when they reached the place where food grows on the water. That food is manoomin, wild rice, standing in the shallow bays. They found it here, in the marshes of Chequamegon Bay, just around the corner from where we are standing. And so the island you can see out there beyond the others, the one now called Madeline Island, became the spiritual heart of the Ojibwe nation. Its Ojibwe name is Mooningwanekaaning, understood to refer to the yellow-shafted flicker, a woodpecker abundant there. Traditions differ on exactly how the stopping places are counted, but they agree on this shore as the destination. For centuries, it was the great gathering place of the Lake Superior bands, and it remains sacred ground. Life here followed the year rather than the clock. Sugar bush in spring when the maples ran, fishing camps and gardens through the summer. Ricing in late summer, canoes pushed through the beds, the grain knocked gently into the hull. Hunting in the fall, inland camps in the deep winter. It was a system tuned to a hard climate over a very long time, and it fed a large population on a coast that looks, to a stranger, almost bare. Our trail runs east from the beach through birch and pine and hemlock up onto the clifftop. It looks like an ordinary northwoods path, and it is not. Somewhere beneath our boots, the sandstone is hollow. The famous mainland sea caves are directly below this ground, and the edge is undercut, unfenced, and crumbling. People fall here. The park asks you to stay back from the lip, and the reason is the same reason the caves exist. Europeans arrived by canoe too. French Jesuits reached the Gichigami area around 1660, and French traders and mapmakers followed. The name Apostle Island seems to come from that period, from a habit of giving holy names to new coasts, and from a mapmaker's guess that there were 12 principal islands. There are not. Depending on how you count, there are around 22. The name stuck anyway, which is a fairly complete summary of colonial cartography. For roughly 2 centuries, this archipelago sat at the center of the fur trade. La Pointe, on Madeline Island, became one of the great posts of the interior, a place where French, and later British and later American companies met Ojibwe trappers and traders. Pelts went east. Iron, cloth, and guns came west. It made some men rich, tied the Ojibwe economy to a distant market, and drew the attention of a government that would soon want the land. That attention came as treaties. In 1837 and 1842, the Ojibwe ceded enormous territories while retaining rights to hunt, fish, and gather on them. Then in 1850, the federal government issued a removal order, and an attempted relocation to Sandy Lake in Minnesota ended in disaster. Hundreds of Ojibwe died of starvation, exposure, and disease. It is remembered as the Sandy Lake tragedy, and it was the direct result of a policy, not of a winter. In response, an elderly leader of La Pointe named Quechuash, known in English as Chief Buffalo, traveled to Washington to argue the case. The removal order was rescinded. In 1854, on Madeline Island, the Treaty of La Pointe established permanent reservations, among them Red Cliff and Bad River, here on this coast. Both nations are here today. Red Cliff and Bad River are living, governing communities, not a chapter in a history book, and this is still their country. Then the islands were discovered by industry. That soft red sandstone, so easy for waves to hollow out, turned out to be superb building stone. From 1868, quarries opened on Basswood Island and later on Hermit and Stockton, and Apostle Island's brownstone was shipped out by the schooner load. It went into the old Chicago Tribune building, into a Milwaukee courthouse, into churches and banks and mansions across Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and St. Paul. The brownstone boom peaked in the 1880s and early 1890s, and then it simply stopped. The financial panic of 1893 made heavy stone construction unaffordable. Architectural taste turned away from dark, weighty facades, and steel frames made thick load-bearing stone walls unnecessary. Within a few years, the derricks were still, the quarrymen gone. Today you can find the quarry faces on the islands, half swallowed by forest, with cut blocks still lying where they were abandoned. From the clifftop, the water directly below is the color of weak tea, stained by tannins and by the red rock. Out beyond it, the lake goes green, then blue, then a hard steel line at the horizon. On a still day, you can hear it working underneath you, a low, irregular boom as swells push into the caves and the air inside them has nowhere to go. That sound is the sea caves being made in real time. Ashore, another extraction was underway. In the second half of the 19th century, the islands and the mainland were logged hard, first for the tall white pine, then for hemlock and hardwoods, floated out in rafts and hauled by rail once the line reached Bayfield in the 1880s. Almost every acre of these islands has been cut at some point. Only a few pockets of old growth escaped, which is why the forest around us looks young. Between the logging and the quarrying, families made a life from the water. Gill net fisheries worked out of the sheltered bays for lake trout, whitefish, and herring, and the catch went out by boat and rail to city markets. At Little Sand Bay, west of here, the Hokinson brothers ran a small family fishery for more than 30 years, retiring in the mid-1960s. The Park Service keeps their dock, their twine shed, and their boat exactly where they left them. All this shipping needed guiding, and the Apostles are a maze of shoals, channels, and blind headlands. The first light went up on Michigan Island in 1856, and others followed on Raspberry, Sand, Outer, Devils, and Long Island. What remains is the largest collection of historic lighthouses anywhere in the national park system, still standing on their sandstone bluffs, most of them now automated, watching an archipelago where the freighters no longer stop. They were not enough. Lake Superior has taken something on the order of 550 ships, and more than half of them have never been found. This lake generates its own weather. A calm morning can become a 4-foot chop by afternoon, and November gales here are the stuff of ballads. The water is so cold that wrecks on the bottom barely decay. They sit down there, intact, with their rigging still up. Protecting all this took decades of argument. Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson, the man who would go on to found Earth Day, pushed hardest for it. On September 26, 1970, President Nixon signed the law creating Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, taking in 20 islands and a 12-mile strip of mainland shore. Long Island was added in 1986. The count today is 21 islands plus the mainland unit, including the cliffs and caves we are standing on. So this ground has been a homeland, a trading post, a quarry, a logging camp, a fishing station, and now a national lakeshore. That is a lot of lives for one shoreline. What is striking walking back through these trees is how little of it shows. The forest has grown over the stumps, the lake has taken the docks, and the cliffs, which were here first, simply carried on doing what they have always done. In 2004, Congress went a step further and designated about 33,000 acres across most of the islands as the Gaylord Nelson Wilderness. It is an unusual kind of wilderness because nearly all of it was cut over, quarried, or farmed within living memory. What is being protected is not untouched land. It is land that was used hard and then let go, and is now, quietly and without much help, putting itself back together. The wildlife has worked that out faster than we have. Black bears live on the islands and they get there by swimming, sometimes miles of open, freezing water between one shore and the next. Deer do it too. Peregrines nest on the cliffs, bald eagles fish the shallows, and the offshore islands are important stopovers for migrating birds crossing the lake. It is a wilderness made of pieces, and the animals treat the water as a road. One thing has to be said plainly. Paddling into these caves is one of the great sea kayak trips in America, and it kills people. The launch at Meyers Beach can be glassy while the caves, a mile and a half east, are being hammered. The cliffs reflect waves back on themselves and double them. The water is cold enough to disable you in minutes. Check the wave forecast, go with a guide, or do not go. And the caves themselves are temporary. Every arch out there is a roof that is being undercut. Every pillar is thinner this year than last. Photographs from a few decades ago show shapes that are simply gone now, collapsed into rubble that the lake has already carried away. We are not looking at a monument. We are looking at a slow demolition, one that started long before us and will not notice when we are finished. Which is, in the end, why it is worth the walk. This shoreline is 1 billion years of sand, a few 100,000 years of ice, 10,000 years of people, a century and a half of industry, and one lake that has outlasted every single one of those and is still working, right now, on the rock beneath our feet. Meyers Beach is a very good place to stand still and notice that. So take the trail. Take the sand between your toes and the cold shock of Gichigami around your ankles. Look out at the islands and know their names and the older names and who is still here. And if you are lucky enough to see the ice one winter, understand exactly how lucky that is. Thank you for watching. Follow for more trails of the world.